be the. We're just waiting a couple minutes here and then we'll get started.
Sounds good.
So, Krista, if you don't mind sharing where you're coming from, we're glad to have you here. I can just share. I'm Jason. I'm from the Innovation Hub at Georgetown, and Kinsley and I are helping build that Innovation Hub out in partnership with Rachel. We'll do introductions here in a second. All right, I guess why don't we go ahead and get started? Mike, why don't you share your screen? But I will just do a quick introduction of the Innovation Hub and our topic today, and then we'll jump right in. So I'm Jason Limbach. I am one of the founding members of the Innovation Hub at the Thrive Center at Georgetown. And Kinsley is my partner and not in crime, but in innovation and helping to build out a hub where we work with nonprofits and startups to help them scale their impact in the mental health and disability care spaces for kids and families. More broadly, the Thrive Center is a center of around 100 folks who are researchers, clinicians, policymakers, content folks who are focused on breakthrough research, clinical innovations around supporting kids and families and thriving. We will share more details about the work that we do at the end of this webinar. But we're really excited today to bring in Mike from the Mighty, who's the CEO and founder of the Mighty, and really have a conversation around, as an organization, whether you're a for-profit or nonprofit organization, how can you center your work and really ground your work in the impact that you're having with your community, and do that in partnership with your community. We all get into this, obviously, to have an impact, but sometimes it can be difficult or challenging to figure out how to measure that impact, how to validate that impact. And so our goal today is to really, move out of the ivory tower, move out of the lab, and talk with an innovator who's done that with his community, and really trying to identify how his community is having an impact for the people they serve. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike. Mike, take it away.
Great. Yeah, I'll just do a quick intro and then I'll jump into a few slides. I do not have many. That we want this to be a discussion, not a presentation. But yeah, as Jason said, I'm Mike Porath, the founder and CEO of the Mighty. I spent most of my career as a journalist working for big news organizations. And then my wife and I have 4 kids. Our oldest was born with a rare disease. And our path was, we just got so much help from other people in that rare disease community, and the bonds we felt like were so strong. We got just connected and a lot of help, and so we decided to build the Mighty as a really a health community that would help connect people to each other, share content, life lessons, all of the things that that they have, and try to do that at scale. And so that was 10 years ago or so when we started it. It's now a community with a few million members who share experiences, that they form groups. We've done about 60,000 pieces of content that members of our community have created. And we, one of the things that we learned along the way is we needed to find ways to measure, are we actually helping people or not? And so the things I'm going to go over today are the lessons learned. We didn't know how to do any of this. So it was really, kind of trial and error and figuring it out. And some serendipity involved along the way in terms of who we got connected with. So yeah, I'm going to share my screen and just go through kind of a few things that I hope to get across today. So the 3 big questions, if I were in the audience, I was thinking, what would I be interested in is, number one, why is measuring impact important? I think for a lot of organizations that folks may be leading, there's a mission behind what you're trying to accomplish. And so you want to know if you're actually accomplishing that or not. And so that's a big part. Measuring impact helps you drive value. It helps you build credibility, trust with the folks in your organization and in your community, and shareholders that are outside your community. So it helps drive funding or investment. It can attract a lot of partners. because you're showing that you're actually living up to what you're, saying you want to do. It informs your, your strategy as an organization when you know what's working and what's not. Ultimately, I think it just makes you more successful if you're actually measuring the thing that you're trying to accomplish. So some ways we can do that, I'll get into that. I kind of balance them on the one part it's qualitative, and on the other it's quantitative. And there's different ways different organizations can leverage those, but ultimately I think most organizations are first trying to educate folks and change their perspective. Then you're actually trying to change their behaviors in terms of what they do, and then ultimately, at least within the healthcare space, we're trying to change health outcomes. And so we're trying to kind of move up that value chain. And then the last, why are partners critical to accomplishing this? I think for a lot of organizations, they don't start out as being good at it. They have a lot of other strengths, but they don't necessarily start with, hey, we're a bunch of scientists that know exactly how to go about, measuring this. Most folks don't have the tools, the expertise, the methods, the credentials, all of those things that will actually show that, some evidence that you're doing what you say that you want to do. And for partners, researchers that are out there, I think, they're also, they need you as well. So they may have the science behind it, but they need the work, the community, the folks that you bring to the table to help them accomplish, their goals as well. So I think that's the way it should work. And then at high level, I won't spend too much detail on this, but I kind of think of it as an organization, and I'm going to say it could be a startup, could be a nonprofit, a patient advocacy organization. At the beginning, you're really trying to educate folks, and so the questions you're asking are, who are we getting our product or our content, whatever it is that you have, who are we getting in front of, what are they learning from it, or how are they engaging with it? And the way that I think you measure, like, are you actually changing any perspectives on this, are more the quantitative metrics around usage and frequency. So for the Mighty, it's how many people are viewing the content that we do, how much time are they spending with it, are they sharing it with others, those types of metrics. What comments are they leaving on it? It begins to inform us on, we should do more of this or less of this. And so that's kind of the beginning, I think, for a lot of organizations where they start, and then they move up to trying to change behaviors. And so the question you're really driving at there is, based on what the work that we do as a startup or as a, a nonprofit, what's happening because of our work? What are people doing differently? What actions are, organizations taking? Are they saying, hey, you're ready, we want to jump in and do a clinical trial with you because you've gotten, so far with, what you've been able to accomplish. You brought all these people to the table. You collected all this data, you're ready. I think for changing behaviors, it's usually more around qualitative metrics. You want to build case studies. You want to show that you influenced a policy change or you created a new initiative. It could be that you've accomplished a lot of fundraising because people see what they're buying into, what you're doing. You're able to gain external support. Those are the types of things that I think you can measure in terms of changing behaviors. And then I think kind of at the highest level, where a lot of organizations really want to get to is, can you actually change the health outcomes of the people that you're trying to impact? And if so, how do you then scale those? And for that, you really do need the scientific evidence that there's measurable improvement. That's where I'll take you through one example of what the Mighty did, where we could not have done this alone. We needed outside partners to help us actually show that what we're trying to accomplish with the content and the community support that we provide, is it actually having a measurable improvement on people's lives? And we didn't know how to do that. We really didn't. And so this example I'm going to take you through is research that we did with a team at Harvard that was studying suicide. And the way this happened, I'd love to tell you, I sought them out. I found the right person. Didn't happen that way. I was at a conference, sitting at a table, just chatting with someone, their company, my company, what we did. And he was fascinated by what the Mighty was doing. And he said, do you have people who talk about suicide? I said, yeah, we have a ton. And I pulled up my screen and just showed him we had, thousands of stories, tens of thousands of comments, things like that. And it turns out that he was working at a lab at Harvard in the suicide space and said, we should partner up. We would love to work with you. We want to know if this is actually helping, or it could actually be triggering people. And so that's kind of how it started. And so just to give you an example, on our site, we have tons of stories. One of which that we saw, the title we gave it was "I Want You to Want to Live," and this was written by a woman in Canada who had experienced quite a bit of suicide ideation, suicidal thoughts, and it was really a letter to anybody going through it. It started, "Dear you, if you are reading this, there's a small piece of you that wants to hold on," and so it was probably 800-900 words. Really a message to them that was non-judgmental, really empathetic on why their life was important and why they should hold on. And we started seeing this really grow. First 1,000 visits a day, then 5,000, then 10,000 visits every day. And we were like, where are people coming to this story from? And so we did a little background, and it turned out that people were Googling the words "I want to die," and then they were landing on this woman's story. And so we were actually presenting the story to people that in that moment they needed something, like this. And then if you scroll through the thousands of comments on that story, you see comments like this on the right saying, "Thank you, you just saved my life." And that comment was actually left 2 years after the woman wrote the story, but she needed it in the moment. She went on to Google and typed something like that in. So we wanted to basically see, how is this actually helping people? Like, we have some anecdotal evidence that it is like this, but does it really work? And so we teamed up with that team at Harvard. We did a series of studies that honestly took about 2 years, so this did not happen very quickly, but it ended up being a study put in the APA's Journal of Consulting Clinical Psychology, so top term publication, and a term that I'd never heard before, which is bibliotherapy. And so what they were calling the mighty was like, this is actually helping people. The words, the stories are helping folks. And so they were able to provide the tools. We got hundreds and hundreds of people who volunteered saying that they were experiencing suicidal thoughts. We presented stories every day to them for 2 weeks. And each day they were, just, answering questions about how they felt. And so the folks at Harvard were able to show that in a pretty significant way, the suicidal thoughts were dropping with people that were, reading stories each day, and their scores around things like optimism and social connectedness were growing. And so, ultimately the story, it said in the conclusion that the digital narrative-based bibliotherapy may be an effective intervention for those at risk of suicide, and may work in part by increasing feelings of perceived shared experience and optimism. So this was kind of now like a new foundation for us, saying, okay, we know that, how this is helping people through that, again, optimism, shared experience. And in this case, we were able to show in a measurable way that it was decreasing their number of suicidal thoughts. So this was kind of a foundational piece for us, and then allowed us to now say, okay, we've got the right template to use in terms of how to measure this, and we can go and look at hundreds of other health conditions to see if we were having kind of a similar impact there. So just wanted to bring that example up as a way of just something that we, again, learned only because we were able to partner with really good researchers, and they helped us, determine how we go about measuring it. So we do, by the way, have a woman on our team who, has a PhD, who does work in research. So she was a really good partner, for them and on our end. So that was certainly helpful, but we didn't have the expertise to really pull this off ourselves. So I'll stop there, and you guys can fire away with questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And for those on, feel free to add questions to the chat, or if you're comfortable, you can come on video and ask live, but don't hesitate to jump in. I guess, Mike, just thinking about, you mentioned this, but it was sort of serendipitous how you ended up with the Harvard team.
Mhm.
If you were to rewind time and go back to the earlier days of the Mighty, when you could see the qualitative
Yep.
impact you were having, what would you do differently? How would you approach thinking about your data and leveraging it to understand impact?
Yeah, I think I would have, started by saying, okay, let's measure this, again, in the early days when we were just getting started, because I think it would have helped us go a little faster to what was working, because some piece of content worked really well, some, less so. I think it could have helped us attract more investors early on. Not just, the investors that we brought on early on were more consumer types. It took us a while to get to the healthcare types of investors because we didn't have evidence that this was actually, it's a difference between being a media company and being a healthcare company. We kind of have a foot in both of those, but without doing this work, we had no foot in the healthcare, door. So if I were starting a company again, I would be looking to do this way, way sooner, right? Really at the get-go of figuring out how do we, go about doing this. And I'd probably, instead of, randomly happening upon someone at a conference, I would go seeking researchers in our whatever space, I was in, and then asking them because they will probably have the best ideas on the method to actually go about, measuring it. We let the folks at Harvard really craft the study. We're like, what, suicide is a very difficult thing to measure in terms of what's, kind of happening in someone's head. And so we were just fortunate that they had a tremendous amount of experience, doing this. It was the, really the foremost team in the world studying this. And so we just let them really dictate how to do. We just said, you guys run with it. You tell us what you need from us. And they needed quite a bit, but we let them really, run with it. But I would say I would just, instead of being passive about it, I would have been much more active about it. Whatever mission an organization is on, think about, ways to measure it and go reach out to folks that are in that space, researchers, scientists. They will probably have a bunch of ideas, for you.
Yeah, that
Right.
makes sense.
That is such a like wonderful testament. And thank you so much for sharing the example. I loved how even in your example, you talk about the different ways, the different data that you had. So you had that initial post, which was meaningful to the community already and indicative of some of the big themes and needs that people were identifying. You had the comments, right? That like kind of gave you more insight into how people were interpreting the work that you were doing. And then of course you had the study that you were able to build on top of that. And I think that very beautifully kind of shows the different kind of levels of data that could be really meaningful for an organization, even if you're not towards that um, academic research stage. And I also just want to underscore that most of the partnerships as an academic researcher that I've engaged with also have come about very randomly, right?
Yeah.
On LinkedIn, someone will send me a question, or I'll meet someone at a conference, or someone will be like, "Hey, like you're interested in this," and so I definitely love that proactivity. My question for you is kind of on the tail end, like so after doing this study and after having what is a really amazing contribution not only to the academic literature but a testament to the work that you're doing. What did you do after you got that data and kind of both
Yeah.
like how did it influence the work that you do and then how did it change how you think about it?
Yeah, so a couple things happened. We had the team that we worked with wanted to expand beyond outside of the suicide space. So we're currently working on studies with them today outside of suicide. So there's one around fibromyalgia. There's different reasons we picked some different health conditions, but we're working with the same team on a number of other studies now. And then when this was published, we actually had a number of researchers reach out to us because they look at journals, they read those, they see the work that's going on, and they felt like some of the things that we were able to accomplish were like, frankly, they needed people for studies, so they started coming to us. So we're doing a lot more based on this one, again, both with the team that we did this study with, but also with a number of other organizations, academic institutions, University of Maryland, University of Washington, St. Louis. There's a number that we're doing some different, different work with now.
I think that's something to really underline is that I think if you're an innovator and you don't come from academia or the clinical side, you may have this perception that you're like it's going to be hard to get engagement from researchers and clinicians.
Yep.
And in some cases that's true, but Rachel, maybe you could underline why you get excited about working with people like Mike.
Yeah, of course. And you kind of hit on part of the answer to this question, Mike, is that you have people's ears. Like you have an audience, you have data. And that's something that's hard to do as an individual researcher for sure. I also think that buy-in, and I do a lot of community engaged work, and it takes a lot of time, effort, energy that is all really important, but it takes a lot of time to get to the space where you can even ask the questions you want to ask and do so in a way that's going to be effective. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'd add to that I think it's really good to acknowledge the parts of your organization, like these are strong things for us and these are weak things. And then you partner up with organizations that are strong in your weak spots, right? And most organizations that start as again, like more of a consumer health organization like ours, or maybe patient advocacy, you probably don't start with the skill sets of doing like really good science. Like it's just, it's unlikely. But it doesn't mean you can't find some really good folks out there, who want to help. And to your point, we realized how important it was that like we could bring people to the table to answer surveys and do things like that. There's a professor at Columbia who's used us on some studies in mental health. And I think we've gotten him about 80% of the people answering the surveys. And it's easy for us because, we have a mental health email that goes out to about 200,000 people every day, just to say who would want to participate. He doesn't need 200,000 people, 1,000 he was thrilled with. And so when we realized, hey, we're actually very strong on this important aspect that they're not, right? But we need them in terms of the scientific side, and that's what makes a really good partnership is you're both bringing something to the table.
I think it's important to like drill in on that a bit, because I don't want to leave people with the impression that it's a binary thing of you don't do this or you do a 2-year study with Harvard.
Yeah, we didn't know if it was going to be a 2-month study. It just, we did one thing and we're like, oh, that actually worked quite well. Let's do a little bit bigger on this, right? So we had a sense of what we wanted to do, but there were several steps along the way before really the team at Harvard designed the full scale study.
Yeah, and I think where you landed with that was impactful, obviously, in a really important area of exploration. But I think something you guys do naturally, and partly potentially because of your conversations with organizations and researchers, but I think like you have data, you have engagement, that you can build your own evidence up, and you're doing that. And I think, Rachel, this is something you talk a lot about with organizations. Like you don't have to wait. I mean, go do the Harvard or Maryland or whatever study where it makes sense, but also take advantage of this wonderful engagement that you already have with your community.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And long before we did, more of what I'd call, more of the evidence-based, like the hardcore, research, we've used surveys from the very beginning on, understanding what people are dealing with and how, we're a for-profit business. So we work with a lot of organizations in healthcare, a lot of pharma companies. And they, even before they set out to do a clinical trial, they want to better understand what are people dealing with. And they've recognized we're a great place to come to kind of get that, information. If you build credibility, build trust, show people what you're doing, like all the people that participated in that scientific study with us, with Harvard, like we showed them the results. We emailed them, thank you very much for participating in this. Here's what we learned. Like you helped, do this. We think that's a really important, aspect of this, as well. So, but yeah, you can use very cheap tools like SurveyMonkey and things like that that will teach you a lot about what's happening in your community or whatever it is that the startup business or the patient advocacy organization. SurveyMonkey and other tools out there will give you like really good information on maybe some of the things you're doing that are working, or what are people more interested in or less interested. So we've been doing that, really from the beginning. It wasn't until several years down the road that we got into this, more evidence-based, work.
Awesome.
Mike, you've spoken a lot kind of about the symbiotic relationship between research team and, kind of providing the organization itself, providing what you can with what you have. I wanted to know a bit more on like how you feel you can become a quality research partner. I think some organizations feel like they have this information, but they don't necessarily know what to do with it, or maybe it's not organized, or there's a lot of kind of stress around it. What do you think is things people can do to prepare?
Yeah, a lot of folks may not realize that there's structured data and unstructured data. And a lot of organizations are sitting on what you would call unstructured data, that if you find the right partner, they will help you provide structure to that, and that you can learn a lot, from it. So I do think a lot of organizations probably go in thinking they don't necessarily have a whole lot of assets to help them learn something. when they may actually be sitting on a lot of really, usable data. So it's just one of those things where I think a lot of people overthink it and try to plan so far in advance of all that you need all of these things. I'd say the first thing is, go out to folks in your space that, can help with this and ask them, because it may be that you're actually far better prepared than you're not. Or if you're not prepared, they can tell you how to get prepared and how to do it, fairly quickly. So it's just one of those things when you're not sure, go find someone who is more knowledgeable, or maybe has, gone through it before. Those are things, but I do think a lot of organizations are sitting on more than they realize in terms of data that's really can be, valuable.
Rachel, do you want to queue up the question from the chat? Yeah.
Yeah, I do just want to comment on what you just said there too, something that I've been thinking a lot about in the age of AI and the age of like the internet and all of the data that's out there, that having those strong relationships that you do with those 200,000 people on your listserv, right? Like that is going to mean that the quality of information and the quality of participants that you have for research is going to be that much higher. And that's definitely something I don't take for granted when I'm thinking through a research partnership. But I love this question in the chat, Mike. What are the most effective strategies for identifying and securing the right partnership beyond traditional research and word of mouth, and trying to avoid the trial and error path, which can be really tiring?
Yeah, I think you can, a quick question to ask someone that you're considering engaging with is, what else have they done in the space, or who else have they worked with, and all that. If they've never worked with, again, like in our case, in the Mighty's case, a consumer health organization, or then it's a small red flag, right? It doesn't mean that it won't work, but if someone comes to you and says, I've done A, B, C, and D, this is what I'm looking to do, here's why I'm interested in you, and they okay, they're going to pass a lot more of those tests and you're going to lean in, I think, more quickly. But again, I think the right place to start a partnership is just through sheer honesty and saying, like, here's what we're really good at, here's where we need help at, and see, does that other person help, or organization kind of fill, some of those gaps, and what are their goals, right? Like, it's really important to know, the idea behind any type of partnership is there's value being created on both sides. And you want, like, there's an agenda that a researcher has, like in the case of the team at Harvard, they let there's a number of us that were co-authors, but the lead person, like, he's like, I think I can get this in a top tier journal, which would be the first top tier journal like he had gotten something into. So like, he was very motivated personally, career wise, which is, totally fine. But you want to look at, like, for our agenda, for their agenda, like, do they match? Do we want to end up in the same place? So I think that's, those are important things to consider when you're at the beginning stages of engaging a potential partner.
Rachel, what about you? What about your perspective? You've seen and been a part of successful partnerships and maybe not so successful. Like, what are some lessons learned you can share?
Yes, especially with academic research partnerships, I think it's really important to start with the basics. Who owns the data? What's going to be coming out of this project? Like, is the expectation academic publications? Like, what else would be useful for the organization? Those are questions that I start a lot of conversations with, really focused on what is going to be best for the organization. Now, I won't speak on behalf of all academic researchers, but I do think it's important to be very clear up front and to have honestly a written down and clear understanding, memorandum of understanding sometimes will create those in terms of like, who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and what are we going to do together?
That's great advice.
If you think about, I'm thinking more to try to potentially build off of Anna Rita's question, kind of top of the funnel, like where to find researchers. I mean, you mentioned some people find you on LinkedIn. Are there other sources? I mean, just bridging off of your point earlier, Mike, of like figuring out, have they done stuff like this before? Like, what are any tips or tricks on how to do that kind of research?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a number of more scientific organizations that, frankly, Rachel will probably know better than I do, then that you can go seeking that. I think that in our case, it's generally been connecting with someone in the space and then them connect, like they know their space really well, right? And they have maybe co-published with different authors, or they've mentored someone or been mentored by someone or something like that. So it's generally been we find someone who's somewhere in that space, and then they help us like get to the potential right person. That's been for us. But Rachel, if you were advising an organization to find the right researcher, like how do they do that, entering more of the science sphere to try to find that? Because that's I truthfully I'm not sure on that one either.
Yeah, there are a couple ways, obviously using Google to search and see who is studying what, but that can be a little overwhelming, I think, for folks. And so a lot of times, I'll try to notice who's being quoted in articles online that journalists are talking to. And a lot of times they'll get an academic partner to comment on something. You could follow up with that person. I also think most university researchers, their email information is publicly available, and you could send a couple cold emails to folks to see if they would be interested in something like this. But I also really recommend to people that you don't always need a professor or a research scientist. Sometimes some of the best research partners who also can become members of your organization down the line are actually graduate students. And I worked with so many organizations as a graduate student and was able to do a lot more work for them than I think a faculty member would have had time for, frankly. And so don't sleep on the graduate students, because they can provide really, really important things, and they need practical learning experiences for their own work.
Yeah,
I love
and
that. There's some real gold in there. I think if you think about even just breaking down an example for the Google search, like let's say somebody's working on peer-to-peer support models, like what should they type into Google?
are you
Honestly,
asking?
Google Scholar has a lot of academic research in it now. I would probably go to Google Scholar and type exactly that in, peer support research, and then maybe a couple more words on a specific topic to clarify it a bit, and then see who comes up. And a lot of academics will have profiles. Academics and non-academic researchers will have profiles on Google Scholar because it's how they track the publications that they're putting out. But at the end of the day, you can find a lot of people on LinkedIn, and I know I get messages pretty much, I would say, weekly from people looking at my research or wanting to kind of ask questions about research.
Yeah, I wanted to jump on one point that Rachel made too about finding graduate students. So taking off my mighty hat and putting on Dupe 15Q, which is a rare disease that my daughter has. So I'm a board member for Dupe 15Q Alliance. And one of the things we did early on when we raised money to invest in research, we did find graduate students who then did their thesis on this and then went into it because we could begin to provide funding. And so an initial $25,000 grant that we gave would turn into something that NIH funds for hundreds of thousands of dollars down the road. And we got this young up and coming researcher who now wants to spend a good chunk of their career working with our organization and our family, our kids, things like that. And so that's actually worked really, really well for us in terms of funding young up and coming scientists. And then they end up doing way more for us in the long run. So I like that strategy, and it's worked really well for us.
How did you find them? What was the way to get to them?
So we would put out when we wanted to fund research, we actually, and I don't know all the places we promoted, but we said like we have a $25,000 grant. And so it was an application process for them. And then you find, oh, there's all these people that are, outside the organization that are looking at these things, that are doing tangential work to this. And they're looking at it saying, wow, what could I do with the 25 grand? I could do this, I could do that. And so then it was getting, kind of our scientific advisors to evaluate the different projects that people were proposing. And then our team of scientists that were already working with us essentially chose the ones that they thought were going to be most valuable.
That's cool. I wonder if you could put those two strategies together. You take, I'm just going to use the peer-to-peer example, but you go to Google Scholar, you search for peer-to-peer, you find out who the heads researchers are, then you go to that school and you offer a $10,000 opportunity for grad students.
Yeah.
Rachel, if
Yeah.
you saw that come through,
Google
would you?
Scholar for sure is a great tip. There's a lot in it on what I'm researching, so thank you so much for that. And also thank you for all the feedback, and the presentation has been pretty cool. Thank you.
Great.
Do you mind sharing like what your experience has been, Anarita?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So my name is Anarita. I am a rare mom. My son has a gene ATP6B0C disorder. He's one of 27 in the world. And together with my husband, who is a neuroscientist, how handy, and another parent, we started VATPA's Alliance to study the protein pump that compounds several genes, including my son's gene, so we can get a little bit of more data. So I was an actress. I started the foundation because of my son. It's 1 year old, and not my son, the foundation. My son is 3 years old. And then, yeah, and they mostly have cognitive impairments, overall development delays. Most of them are nonverbal, and the worst part is the epilepsy. It's the non-retractable one. So, I have like 60 to 100 seizures a day, and seizures of 20 minutes, or, are the hardcore ones.
Yeah.
So those are like, that's the painful, I think, the painful part, because the tube fed and all of that, that what to do. With epilepsy, you don't. It's yeah. So that's it. That's what brings me here. So I'm presiding the foundation, and with two other partners, as I said. And the reason why I was hearing and I was Googling as well at the same time, it's because we are so rare, and not only we are rare, we are very new. So for you to have an idea, my son was diagnosed in December 2022. The first paper that links it with human diseases came out in September 2022, so 3 months before. 3 months. So if we had our diagnosis in June, there was no paper. It just worked out that we had that one paper. And what we did is exactly what you guys are saying. We reached out to all the scientists that were in the paper. We learned the most we could about the disease and everything. And now we collected everybody, or we find already 59 families. We are together in a private.
Sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. So we had like 59, we have 59 families, and we do office hours. So we listen to them every month, and we keep them engaged. And we're doing the data collection program, partnering with RareX to collect data from everybody. And we are going to announce, I think next week, our partnership with Citizen, which is already formalized. We just need to announce it. So, but the thing is, and what kind of brought me here is, so imagine everything is new. The oldest article for one of the genes, 2018. There's nothing, before that. And most of them are 2021, 2022, like my son, and that's it. And some I've not even described yet. And so we start RareX this year. So we start to have the data from this point on. But we're talking about 59 families. So it seems doable that a researcher could create some kind of natural history study retrospective. So that instead of waiting 10 years to have the data, we would retrospectively have a 10-year worth of data. Because I don't know how many people here are in rare. I know, Mike, you are, but you also, Jason, okay. So I do believe we all have.
a quick note. I gather you've already met Nasha Fitter because you're working with the Citizen Health.
Yes, yeah.
So my son has Fox G1.
Oh,
And
yeah, and I
so,
met what's her name? Um, not Sandra. Oh my God, the one that she just released a video about her daughter.
yeah,
It will come up to me. I'll put it in the chat.
yeah, great.
Yeah, I know of quite a few people from Fox
Yeah.
J1. Yeah,
Because
you are
we
with a
followed a
great community.
similar journey, for
Well,
sure.
you guys are far away from ahead of us, right? We,
Oh, it's been 10 years, and Nasha's really, I
yeah,
remember Nasha joined the community when there were 100 families, so we were at that
yeah,
early stage.
And I just
yeah, exactly.
uh, uh
But that's just to finish up. The point was just like, so every rare parent has a notebook, right? Very specific with everything that happened since their child was born. So that's why we kind of believe a retrospective data of children would be possible, either they are alive or not, because that's more data. And yeah, I think it's like, how do we get the right people to get the surveys, and then how do we put it in a way that then researchers can use that data, right? Because not, why are we bothering families and then collecting the data, and then and that's why, like, coming to maybe university and partnering up and with researchers might be a great tip. Yeah, sorry,
and
I interrupt you.
no. I was just going to ask Carrie if you wanted to jump in at all. So I know Carrie Well, who's here. She's actually the executive director for Duke 15Q Alliance. And
Oh.
so, Carrie, when you came in a few years ago until now, in terms of the work that you've done with researchers and all that, would you have any advice in terms of, as a burgeoning nonprofit in the rare space, what you would go about doing? Based on, you've worked with a lot of scientists at this point.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head where, and I think Rachel, you said it too. Don't forget the up and coming students. As you
Mhm.
mentioned, Mike, that has been a huge thing for us. One of the things too is, even if you can offer small grants, we're at a point where we're trying to elevate our the grant offerings. But even in the last like 2 years, we now have gauged more interest. Also, don't forget to go back to people when they do articles and ask them, do you know somebody who could apply for this funding? Even if they're
Mm,
not interested, they may know an up and coming person. I know, like
yeah.
you said, Anna, that there may not be a lot of papers written yet. Having a science symposium obviously is great, even if it starts out small.
Mhm.
Publishing out to your parents anything you can on a family friendly way that makes sense to them, understanding the research, even if there's not a paper published yet, because you'd be so surprised. They may just know the right person that can get your foot in the door. Making sure that you're present at some of the big hitting conferences, and I'm sure all of you do this, because if you have a kiddo in rare, you're fighting and you're trying to get in front of everyone, but using
Yeah.
opportunities like going to American Epilepsy Society conference, getting in front of the key people there that you may not get an email back from, is also a great way to get your foot in the door. But we're also happy to talk to anyone that we may be able to help help you see how we open doors. We also have a few parents who are relentless, and they will reach out to anyone that looks like they're doing science close to what we're wanting, and that has made a
Okay.
huge difference. If they saw a pharmaceutical company doing a trial that, like, one of the things that's affected in Duke 15Q is the UBE3A gene. And so anybody who was doing something close to UBE3A, we went after, and they're like, well, we haven't thought about you. We've never heard of you. This could possibly help. And so just we hit
Mhm.
the pavement and get in front of anyone who will speak to us is really the key. So yeah, but I'll put my email in as well. I'm happy to also answer any questions anybody has after the call. But thank you. This is great. So good shout out, Mike, for Duke 15Q syndrome.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, really appreciate both of you sharing, kind of the challenges, but lessons learned, both as a parent, and then I think just for this broader community of people who are trying to think about how do you build up, the evidence to
Mhm.
change the outcomes for our kids. And one thing I wanted to share is thinking about Fox G1, thinking about other mental health or physical or every combination of challenges that could present. I think one of the most powerful things these groups can bring, in addition to trying to change outcomes for our kids, is the family mental health benefit, the peer-to-peer supports, just knowing you're not alone. And so, as you think about, I guess, I imagine you're not losing sight of this, but don't lose sight of that as a thing to like really build on and leverage, because that's such a huge impact for each of us as parents, but as importantly, if not more, for our kids.
And one thing we learned over the years, to your point, Jason, is it helps on both sides. It helps the person who's sharing it, and it helps the person who's like learning it or taking it in. That was one of the biggest surprises when we started the Mighty, is I could envision the benefits of people reading these stories, from others. I did not recognize how therapeutic they would actually be for the people writing the stories and talking about what they learned. When you actually sit down and have to articulate it, a lot more comes to you, and you learn through that process. And then you see all these other people responding or commenting or hearting, and it makes you feel much better, about things, just that, that connective tissue that you form with others. So, but yeah, Jason, again, to your point, it's helping both sides, both the people, sharing things and the people receiving them too.
Well, wonderful. I really appreciate this conversation, Mike, for you kind of laying out the journey and the lessons learned. I think helpful for folks here, but also for lots of innovators who are really trying to make an impact with and for their community. So appreciate you taking the time, and then I definitely appreciate those who joined in and asked questions.
That's great. Anything else? Any other questions?
No, yeah, I think we're connecting on LinkedIn as well, so I'll bother you probably sometime. Maybe not this soon, but eventually.
Great, thanks. And thanks for everyone at the Thrive Center. I know you guys are just getting started, but you're after such a big mission, and anything that the rest of us can do to support you guys on it, just let us know.
Yeah, we appreciate it. All right, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye bye.